Future Commerce is brought to you by Octane AI. Let me ask you a question. Do you want to leverage more customer data and increase your revenue at your brand? The answer should be yes and yes. And with Octane AI, every Shopify and Shopify Plus merchant can do just that. Learn about your customers and collect buyer profile data with engaging quizzes and create personalized campaigns and flows using Facebook Messenger and SMS. Octane AI has plans for any sized business, and Future Commerce listeners get 10% off your first 6 months. So go sign up right now at octaneai.com/future. That's octaneai.com/future. Hello and welcome to Future Commerce, the podcast about cutting edge. That's right. I said it, Brian. Next generation.
Throwback.
I'm Philip.
And I'm Brian.
And this is our throwback episode. We are at episode 200.
What?
We did
200
it.
episodes.
This is our 200th
am
episode.
so happy right now.
Are you?
I am.
You're kind of tired right now.
Yeah, it's early. This is early. I'm tearing up because I'm so tired.
I hope that, if you've been around since the very beginning, I hope that this is a celebration for you as well. If you've been listening since the start, we
celebrate you too. If you've been listening since the start,
yeah,
thanks for sticking with us.
It's true. You've listened to over 200 episodes of Future Commerce. It's somewhere in the 260s now, if you count it all. Count everything, bonus episodes. If you count the step-by-steps, if you count live streams, if you count everything. We're something close to 260-ish episodes. But none of this would be possible if it wasn't for you, our listeners, who number in the tens of thousands now. It's kind of insane. It's been an incredible ride, and cannot believe we're here. So we decided, Brian, we're taking a victory lap.
Yeah, or at least we can talk about our humble beginnings and where we've come to now.
How did we get here? It's amazing how we got here. When we launched, we launched this show. It was actually 2016.
2016.
I can't even believe that. That's incredible. And we've put out years upon years of content at this point. So we thought we would take a little bit of a look back. And if you're new to the show, this is not going to be one of those crappy sort of mail it in episodes where you get those like best ofs. No. Brian and I, we're going to narrate our best of.
Yeah, that's so much better that way.
Do you? I thought we would like take a couple glimpses, over the next, 4 hours. How long do we have today? We don't have that long.
Oh, we're not doing a 4-hour episode. We talked about doing a 4-hour episode.
I'm sorry.
We go back to like the Romilly episode. Like that was our longest.
Oh, you're getting
episode.
a little ahead of us, but that is one for the books. Why don't we start sort of toward the very beginning, which is our very first guest that we ever had. Who was it? It was Scott Emmons.
It was Scott Emmons. Actually, technically, Tom Robertshaw was our first.
Yeah. Do we give Tom any credit though? I mean, he's a
Tom's
dear
our friend.
I guess. If you want to be technical, Tom was the first guest. But our first guest, no offense, Tom, that actually meant something in the world of retail.
Oh, poor Tom.
Was Scott Emmons, who at the time was running the innovation lab over at Neiman Marcus, right?
Yeah, yes. In fact, why don't we roll a clip and then I'll do a little story time about that.
Okay, here we go.
We know that technology continues to insert itself into the shopping experience, that it has to, and it's all part of that sort of, I think, natural blurring of the lines between the online retail business and the physical retail business.
The online to offline blur is something that was being talked about in 2016. That's
don't
impressive.
Forget, yes, this predated our last president.
What?
Yes.
This was the Barack Obama era. I almost said George Bush. Wow, how old am I? What year is this?
I don't even know.
This is that's an incredible thing. Actually, this is 3 presidents ago.
You might be old, but you're
what were
not
a couple of those
old.
offline to online things that he was talking about? I remember it was like magic mirrors.
Yeah, it was. In fact, the way that I met Scott was actually at the first Shop Talk, which is amazing. Scott was actually the opening event. And somehow, I mean, it was a mixer. It was a mixing event. And,
you were mixing it up.
I was mixing it up and just kind of bumbling around and talking to people. And I landed at Scott. And of course, back in those days, I mean, these were the days of episode 8, which nobody knows what that means.
Oh my gosh, Brian. I told you we're not going to cover it here.
I know we're not. I know, but this is how I got to know Scott, which was basically like spewing all of my theories about body data at Scott. And at the end of the conversation, he was like, that's actually interesting. Let's chat.
That's okay. And I got to give it to you. Like Brian in the early days had such hustle. Not that you don't anymore. You definitely do. You are the hustler. But this is a man, Brian, to get guests on the show would sneak backstage at events. Like he, if you're listening, like Brian Lang is a little bit of a shark. He's not above putting on a t-shirt for a conference that he doesn't belong to go get someone to pay him just a little bit of attention. But anyway,
you do what you got to do.
And the episode 8 reference, by the way, for those that are uninitiated, is that I feel like that was the turning point that comes up over and over and over and over again. That this show could be much more than just let's cover the news of what's coming in tech and talking about what the future of retail tech might be, but more about far futurism. And you know, this idea of what are the implications of the path and the trajectory we're on, which I think set a tone for the next year. This is a clip. This is one I really appreciated, which is sort of just you kind of going off, I think, about this idea of the altar of Black Friday that we all worship at once a year. Let's take a listen to it from episode 53 in 2017. This is Consumerism is Our Religion.
I will say this: if our God is consumerism, and the malls were certainly our temples. It's interesting. Our religion's changing, where our God is now our temple is now the internet.
You've gotten a little more eloquent over the years, but I will say,
I have,
and you got better mic technique.
I do. I definitely do.
But you haven't stopped saying amazing, potent potables and quotables. So
it's interesting. We've been saying that for a long time now. I feel like a lot of what we've been saying just in this past year still relates back to that. This sort of, this idea, this transition of the altar that American consumerism worships at and what that looks like.
It's funny too, which, by the way, those weren't necessarily original ideas in 2016, 2017, but they were original to us. And it was us sort of working out. There's a lot of talk about building in public these days. And it's more like, bragging in public. What we have done, and we've left it all up for everyone to listen to. Everyone can go see. In fact, every single word we've ever spoken is transcribed right now at futurecommerce.fm.
Almost every word.
It's pretty much everything that we've said is searchable. And it's this incredible, very long form, and it would take you a long time to listen to, journey of
thought progression.
watching us find our voice together and watching us figure out what the show is all about. And so actually one of those turning points was also when we met the former DepSec at State, Danny Sepulveda, another amazing get from Brian Lang to bring someone with an incredible voice and a perspective on the future into our show. And so let's listen to what Danny had to say about I believe he's speaking about network neutrality. This is from episode 49 in 2017 with Danny Sepulveda.
The internet is the interconnection of communications networks around the world built on internet protocol. And that is communicating everything from supply chain management to now the Internet of Things, to multinationals' management of their human resources activities around the world. So it really is just one thing now. There is no differentiator between what we used to call the internet economy and the regular economy. It's just the digital economy. It's just one big thing.
I was waiting for you to say something.
More
Brian.
line blurring is what's happening there. Danny, we go from Scott to Danny, some 40-ish episodes later, and it's a very clear trend. And that's actually, in many ways, one of the reasons we sort of started the show was because you and I recognized some things that were happening. We had conversations with each other about it, and it was like, who else is talking about this? We didn't know. We couldn't. It was like, let's start talking about it, because there weren't too many resources out there sort of chatting about these things in public. You talked about public building. It was more like us publicly sort of vomiting up our ideas on the internet and seeing what sort of what stuck.
There really weren't any retail focused podcasts either at the time.
Yeah. Yes.
There were certainly like e-commerce tips and tricks podcasts, and my goodness, there's a lot of those today too. And it's so funny because the e-commerce tips and tricks have changed over the years, but the trajectory of how to engage in business that actually recognizes consumers as people hasn't really changed. And the thing that we have we've honed our message and figured it out over the last 4 or 5 years, but and retail tech has changed. But I think the thing that we found out over time is it's not really about the technology,
right?
Although technology definitely has a bearing. So that was 2017, 2018. I remember this. It feels like it was yesterday. I can't believe it was 3 some years ago. But we went to Amazon Go, and it was like 2 weeks after it opened. There was like somebody standing outside who was asking for our press credentials or something. Do you remember this?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah. It was very, very soon after it opened. And it was kind of an amazing experience to kind of be there and be podcasting live. For whatever reason, we don't have a clip of it. I remember, because I'm an idiot and I didn't press the record button. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. We were there talking to them at the front, and we should have been recording the whole time. But that was funny.
That was like before. It definitely wasn't before vloggers, where people just like unabashedly walked around with a camera in front of their face. But it was definitely before I was aware that people did that, and so I was very sheepish. Like, I didn't want to look like I was recording something.
You were like, we have to produce it. It's got to be on the real mics.
Kill me. Well, it would be done a little differently today. But that is one implementation of technology that's interesting. That hasn't, I don't know, quite gone anywhere or made a mark in the culture, but certainly hinted at, like,
other than the SoftBank standard investment that just happened.
Well, okay, sure. That puts this episode at a specific point in time, Brian Lang. Thank you. But
it is
funny.
Episode 200.
It is. That's true. But there's so it's not like, if you would have asked me 3 years later, I would have said, "Oh gosh, I mean, this is going to explode everywhere. We're going to have more Just Walk Out shopping, and maybe we will, but it's taking a little longer than we thought." That's kind of a recurrent theme for us. Because I specifically remember us thinking conversational commerce was going to be huge.
What's interesting is that conversational commerce, the conversation around it has evolved over the years. And I think it's just morphed into something else that it is today. And it's taken longer. It's absolutely taken longer than we hoped it would. I think we talked about it on our first episode. And it's interesting also because I remember reading articles from Greylock and others talking about how VCs were like, please just give us something to invest in around this. Please, somebody somewhere, give us something that's actually like usable and interesting around this. And it's taken some time, and I think we're starting to get there now. But there's the conversation, I think, to your point, Philip, the conversation has changed for us because technology adoption is, well, it's always slower than you want it to be. You see potentials, you see opportunity, but it's really not about the technology. It's about people adopting technology, and
or
how people use technology,
how they use it, right?
And it's about it's about how people interact with each other. And there's a good and healthy interactions, and there's also unhealthy interactions. And I think working our way through those has been a part of this journey as well.
Let's talk about one of those unhealthy interactions. One that we were on very early on, within, I think, the same week. Let's take a listen to the clip and then we'll give you some context around it. This is about deep fakes in 2018, episode number 63. There's no real legal consensus on deep fakes and what they are, but a lot of communities came together and said these are not something that we want to support. So this is kind of an impressive thing. There was a community on Reddit that was the deep fake subreddit, was banned by Reddit. Also, Pornhub, Giphy Cat, Discord, and Imager all came out. And they banned like hundreds of communities that were around these. And so I felt like this was hitting right on the topic of that scary sort of Black Mirror-esque world that we now live in, where you can unwittingly, if a video is out of view on YouTube, your face could be unwittingly applied to literally any context in some of the seediest and darkest ways. And who knew in February of 2018 that would be a news story that would be common knowledge, that, the concept of deep fakes, and especially around disinformation, would be so commonplace that, it's part of popular culture now. In fact, there's a whole part of popular culture wherein fans of, say, Star Wars try to use deep fakes to recreate better visual effects. It's an incredible thing that we picked up on very early on.
Yeah, that was definitely pre LinkedIn conversation. That was early. I totally agree. In fact, some of the things we talked about in that episode, I feel like are still going to come to bear about how it's going to be leveraged. And I think we knew we were early there. It's going to continue to mature, and I think deep fakes are going to continue to be part of the conversation in years to come, because they are so impressive and so lifelike, and they're getting easier and cheaper to accomplish.
There's another thing that's sort of impressive and that we picked up on in 2018, which is the coming boom in secondhand retail. Or what we would go on to call secondhand commerce, which the popular press actually then dubbed re-commerce, which I think is actually better. Let's take a listen to this clip from episode 70 in 2018. I think this episode was titled "Secondhand is the New New," and this is just you and I sort of rapping after an interview we did in that segment. It's just interesting that there's these brands that have, sort of manufactured scarcity, and very expensive for like canvas and leather, or like very expensive, products. But what they've done is they have a very, very large following in a secondary market, and they, these products take on a sort of a life of their own, and amplify the brand in secondary market more than the brand could do on its own in direct to consumer.
Yeah. I mean, if that's not a trend right now, I don't know what is. Like
manufactured scarcity. What?
Wow. You mean you can manufacture scarcity digitally as well?
No, that's a whole other thing. My goodness gracious.
You could actually argue that the entire NFT market is like secondhand scarcity. it's secondhand commerce. Like after it's the initial sale,
third hand scarcity.
Yeah.
What's crazy about listening to that conversation? That could have been a conversation that we could have had this year. It could have been a conversation we had last year.
Yeah.
This idea of manufactured scarcity that's kind of how the whole world has always worked, right? Like
Yes.
gas supply or oil supply, manufactured scarcity. Diamond supply, manufactured scarcity.
Gold.
Like there's a whole sense of this, like most everything that we have access to, even precious metals. It's manufactured scarcity. The thing that is interesting is to watch this happen in real time in things that became so culturally significant, like sneakers. Listening back, it's like that conversation could have taken place just yesterday. Let's shift gears a little bit because we had a big turning point. One thing we've never talked about, or what we haven't talked about yet here, is that the 3 years of 2016, 2017, and 18 were sort of this huge trajectory for us of doing live events.
Yeah, we did a ton. I did a huge amount of live events. In fact, I can't wait to do live events again, and we will, and that will continue to be part of what we do as we are allowed to. Yeah,
you were at eTail. You were at we both did NRF multiple times. I think at this point when we're going into 2019, we had highlighted eTail or eTail Shop Talk. I think we'd hit in 2018. So we'd had so many live podcast opportunities, but the one I wanted to share, I'll give without any context, and then we can we can talk a little bit about it. This is from 2019, episode number 95, Bottle Up Kindness.
You could have a system that you're not as efficient with, and it kind of blocks you from being able to be as souped up or innovative as possible. And it's almost like it's the least sexy thing to talk about, right? Like, what is your POS or what is your data management system or whatever? But it's kind of like you can't do any of the supercharged stuff without eating your peas and carrots first, right? So I always say, like, don't buy a Lamborghini if you haven't built the road yet.
Classic Ingrid right there.
Who was speaking for that was
Ingrid Millman-Cordy, and that was our first episode with us, and she's done multiple episodes with us since then.
She's not just a friend of the show. I would say Ingrid is very much part of the show now.
Yeah,
she's really helped us hone our voice, and her coming around in that January episode, number 95 of 2019, I think really helped us get a new perspective. That was also after we had done a listener study with a market research firm that highlighted a bunch of things to us that we didn't realize we had blind spots in.
Yeah. Why don't you roll that tape as well?
Well, I'm okay.
All right, while you're finding that, another story about the evolution of the store. This was another situation where I was at a conference. And the way that I met Ingrid was she was on a panel at eTail West, and she was talking on the panel, and I don't mean to disparage the other people on the panel, but they were not having their best day. They did not have very many good things to say. And so Ingrid was just like, just jumping in there and saying some incredible things. And then like she talked for, maybe 3 minutes or something like that. And she's like, oh, but I've been talking too much. Why don't you talk? Of course, which is very gracious of her. And I was like, no, Ingrid, don't stop talking. You just need to keep talking, because what you're saying is way more interesting and way more relevant than what anyone else is saying on this panel. And I immediately ran up and talked to her after the panel. I was like, you need to come on the podcast. It was one of those moments where you just recognize that somebody else is head and shoulders above the competition, not the competition.
Other people who are speaking in the space. Yeah,
real insight and could actually articulate it in a way that made a lot of sense. And so I was really impressed.
Hey, Philip here to tell you about our newest sponsor, Octane AI. If you are on Shopify or Shopify Plus, and who isn't, am I right? Then you need what Octane AI has to offer. I am a huge fan of guided selling, and Octane AI has tools that allow you to get to know your customers on a deeper level and collect more buyer profile data. And what does that mean? Well, it means that you can use things like shop quizzes, Facebook Messenger, SMS, and opt-in tools to allow you to engage your customer more personally so you can get on their level. More personalized campaigns and flows across all channel means more ROI. And that ROI that is driven from Octane AI is usable in other platforms with their integrations to other tools you're already using. Brands have already seen incredible results, up to 16x increase in email signups and a 28% increase in AOV. That's average order value, money in your pocket. What are you waiting for? Octane AI has plans for any sized business. Future Commerce listeners get 20% off the first 6 months when you sign up. So why don't you sign up today? Go to octaneai.com/future. Once again, that's octaneai.com/future and tell them Philip sent you. There's something to be said of too, and this is where I think this gets back into what I was saying about like blind spots, is realizing that our own perspective and you know, just suffer me through this, but our own perspective as two white males in information and knowledge work is informed by extreme amounts of privilege and is informed by one perspective and one viewpoint in the world. And the years prior on this show, prior to 2019, we didn't have really consistent other voices, specifically women's voices or younger perspectives, to help us understand really like what other people's points of view are and what their challenges, not just in their role as operators in the business, but as people and consumers in the world. And having other people's perspectives changed everything for us. Yeah. We did this listener study, and the two main takeaways were it's a bunch of dudes, particularly mostly white dudes on this show, and you kind of begin to attract that same sort of an audience. And for us to have a more equal representation, when we talk about future commerce, when we talk about what the future looks like, that's not the future I want to create. I want to have a more equitable future. And so that was such an eye-opening study for us to really kind of dive into what are we missing, right? What are we missing in our content creation? And that was when we really started thinking, how do we tell different stories through other people's perspectives? Let's listen to a little bit about what that research drew out. And this is Rachel Swanson of Method and Mode, who if you've been listening for a couple years, this is her first appearance on the show. She conducted our listener study through Method and Mode, our very first one. And little did she know, she would be partnering with us multiple times over the next 2 years. Let's listen to what Rachel had to say about some of the data that came out in that first study that we did back in late 2018.
I want people to feel obviously the content is relevant, but 4 out of 5 actually said that Future Commerce introduces them to new concepts and platforms that you wouldn't have discovered otherwise, which to me is like the ultimate badge of content, especially professional content.
And that was from episode number 103, data-driven storytelling. We didn't do anything for 100th episode, did we?
I don't think we did, but it's insane to me to think that was 100 episodes ago, almost, or over actually.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We're kind of taking a victory lap here, but I can't tell you how much I've discovered as a result of doing this show. I mean, let alone the people that are listening, all of you that are listening. I have learned so much, and just become a better person and professional and thinker and just everything. Like my life has actually been transformed by this in many ways.
I agree. Yeah.
And so I'm actually humbled to be a part of this and so happy that, way back when we decided to do this, Philip, because I think I am a better person as a result.
Oh my gosh, me too. I feel the same way. I feel the exact same way. It's it's amazing. Again, building in public. It's not all, building in public today has a very specific connotation on Twitter anyway, about, sharing growth metrics and sharing the wins and the losses, etc. We've been growing in public. I think just growing as people and as individuals, and finding not just our voice as podcasters, because who cares, right? It's just one person, one or two people's perspectives, but us becoming better, just better human beings, and learning that there are not just learning, but applying some of the things that we've learned into building this as a business. We started a podcast, but now we have a business. It's so much bigger than just the podcast. And this, I think 2019 also represented a huge shift for us in realizing that we could be building content that sits outside of the podcast proper. And, in 2019, it's amazing to look back. We didn't even have a website that could have content that wasn't podcasts.
Yep.
And we realized in 2019, to get to where we want to go, to do the next steps, we're going to have to take a huge leap forward, and we're going to have to start taking some of our own medicine and applying some of the things that we tell retailers to do all the time from our particular perspectives as in the world of professional consulting, and start applying it to Future Commerce as a business. One of those things was we came to really came to form a relationship with the folks at Climate Neutral. And so we announced on Earth Day in 2019 that we were joining the Climate Neutral program. We committed to being carbon neutral in 2019. We've maintained that commitment for the past 3 years. But us putting that commitment down and saying, hey, as a small early stage company, before we even had one employee, that we are going to be carbon neutral, that was kind of a scary thing for me to say that, okay, well, how does that impact us? Like, how does that impact our travel? How does that impact how we do anything? Like, how do you grow as a business if you can't produce carbon? It gave me a completely different perspective. And I know that sounds kind of juvenile almost, but it's really interesting what happens to you when you actually have to make those kinds of decisions, and when you have to make those commitments and you do them in public. You sort of hold yourself accountable in the public to do them. It's sort of eye-opening to see what, how do businesses do that at scale? It puts a different wrapper around, well, I just wrote a big think piece that, punches up at Victoria's Secret because they don't have a stated, climate policy. As a 2-person business, if I'm wrestling with it, oh my gosh. Anyway. And
it's interesting. That is the moment we started to write seriously. We started to get into, and we rebranded. I don't know if you remember, but our old branding, it looked kind of like the branding that Cord just released. The color scheme,
the color's the same.
The future of commerce
looks about the same. It says the future of commerce. Not to slap Cord at all. That's a whole other topic. Their pivot. We had a pivot. Our pivot. Yeah,
we did.
Our pivot was huge.
And I think that connection with Rachel and that, the clip you just played, it actually was a huge moment for us. Because that's when we realized, how important research was to us, what it meant to us, just doing it on our own property. And that's when we started to look at where, how we could start to do some of that in commerce as well. And the importance of being able to test some of your ideas and hypothesis against the data. And I think we've learned a ton since we started to do it. One of the things that's been huge for me, a big learnings on this show, and is the future isn't there's a lot of things that it is in technology and change and a lot of things. I've actually realized, I thought we were in kind of a mature industry. That's again a little bit naive and juvenile to think that, but it was e-commerce has been around for a long time. We know what we're doing. This is something that we've got down. This is easy stuff. Let's talk about the hard stuff. And it's wait a minute, hold on. Actually, it gets back to what Ingrid said in that clip. the blocking and tackling, eating your peas and carrots, we haven't finished that yet.
You're right.
Most of the future of commerce is just getting data right, understanding how to interpret it, understanding when and where to surface it, understanding if it's clean or it's not, understanding how to get it to the point where it is usable and actionable and has a reason to exist that is meaningful.
Yeah.
That is actually the future of commerce, like big chunk of it at least. And that's what we recognize as a business. Like, there's a ton of data out there. There's so much data out there. We collect data all the time, and we're going to be adding to that. Like, the pile is just getting bigger. But the problem with just having a whole bunch of data and just having, like, recognizing what's out there, or seeing like a moment in time, oh, this many people did this, or oh, this many businesses invested in this. It actually doesn't mean that much without being able to interpret it. And this gets back to a Census article that you just wrote, Philip, about what it means to have instinct and to be able to interpret data. I think that is something that, again, talking about evolution of what we're doing here, being able to provide a narrative and an understanding and a recognition of that data and have it be something that you want to consume, not just something you have to consume, I think is really, really important.
Wow, the coffee just kicked in, Brian. I'm feeling it from you right now. Let's shift gears a little bit. Speaking of pivots, this was what I believe might have been probably the most, represents, well, number one, the most listened to episode that we've ever produced.
Oh, it's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah, this was in 2019. But it was around a pivot. It was around a business pivot. And that pivot coincided with not just about creating things in the world, but about maybe being able to create the world that you want to live in. This is from episode number 124 with Nick and Emmett from Pattern Brands. Let's roll the clip.
I think they're the types of things we're trying to do to help people grow intention, rather than just gravitate towards the overall push of the digital ecosystem. The second one I'd say is this idea about selling a product. I don't think we're selling a product. I think we're selling a way to use your time.
And that, to me, that was the moment. And if the clip had gone a little longer, that was the moment where I was like, okay, wait, hold on. I got it. I got what you're doing. I understand what you're doing. It's bigger than just the product. It's bigger than the brand. You have the power. Like Nick and Emmett had the power and the influence. They had built enough influence to then use the very tool that they had developed to try to bring a world that they wanted to exist into existence. And that's where it clicked for me. You can hear it. If you go back and listen, we'll link it up in the show notes. That episode, 124, that's when it clicked for me that commerce has the power to change the world.
Yes. Commerce touches everything. It just about everything.
Yeah.
And so if by influencing commerce, you actually are influencing the world.
Yeah.
And that was I totally agree. It was a huge moment. Seeing the transformation from Gin Lane, the agency that was sort of empowering other people's stories and helping them do the things that they wanted to do. Seeing Nick and Emmett turn that around and say, okay, actually, it's time for us to own this and build the type of brand that we believe is the way the world should work and represents our viewpoint on the world and have an impact that way. I think that was huge.
But it wasn't the big Hopi changey. Like,
no, it wasn't
the big. It was just about like how one person wants to spend their time and to be more intentional and more mindful, and that I think just resonated with me in such a deep way. Anyway, big shift for us. Also, big shifts, Brian, is we have had multiple opportunities to be able to interview our heroes. We didn't actually, one of which shall not be named on this show ever again. That's a whole other problem. But you got to sit down with someone who represented a lot to you. There's a musician that you really appreciate at a certain label that you also really appreciate. Can you just, we don't have a clip of it here, but I thought maybe I'd let you shout that one out.
No, that was also really cool. That was John Beeler, and look at me, I'm bald.
Wow, now your brain's broken.
Wow, you just blew my mind. That was the episode we did with Asthmatic Kitty, and Sufjan Stevens, Stepfather Lowell, blew my mind that we even could touch that and talk about that and the impact they had. And actually the mindset of Asthmatic Kitty is something actually I still want to dive into in a future date at a deeper level. And so maybe more on that to come. But yeah. And think about this, Phil. You're absolutely right. Tons of heroes that we had on the show. I remember way back, I think it was episode 14. We also had Jason L. Baptiste on.
That's true.
Who was a huge influence on you at the moment, at that time, and passive commerce and his thoughts around that. We've had a lot of people on the show. In fact, one of the ones in 2019 that blew us both away was Matt Taylor from
Tracksmith. But and we have a clip of it. We're going to play the clip. But just to give you context around why this was so important to me, it was that my public adoration of Tracksmith for the course of a year caused them to reach out to me and say, hey, do you want to come to the store and sit down with Matt and record a podcast? What? Yes, please. Let's. This is from episode number 132 with Matt Taylor.
I think that most of the running brands that we know today that have been successful all started from a very similar place, which is this real passion and sort of desire to, support and help and make better, the running industry and the running community. And so our approach is really not that dissimilar from all of those brands and how they started.
And we sat in their stock room in the back of their track house on Newbury Street, which admittedly beautiful location, historic location from a Boston Marathon's perspective, and a beautiful building. But you get the sense when you walk in there, man, this brand really is punching well above its weight because this is a small company.
Yeah.
And when you see, like, I came into this context of, oh my gosh, Tracksmith does what nobody else is doing, not Nike, not anybody. They are doing, like, I had this, like, in my mind, Tracksmith is up on this pedestal. And we walk in, it's like, there's 7 desks in here. And it's a very small showroom. And we're meeting, like, we're recording a podcast in a stock room that is smaller than the office that I'm sitting in right now in my house. And, so it's incredible to meet people that you consider to be heroes, but also realize, hey, one, they're real people, that two, their influence can be outsized in the world compared to the actual size of the brand or size, or the amount of revenue or the amount of capital that they have behind them.
I think it's a really good point. I mean, that was true for Asthmatic Kitty and for Jason L. Baptiste and for a whole bunch of other people that we had on the show that we thought were like just absolutely mind-boggling that we could ever have them. And that's not true for everyone. I mean, we had the co-founder of Wayfair on the show, and it's like you've got some of those guys on here as well, where it's a lot bigger than you expect.
Big gets, big get, totally, for sure.
And Jeremy King, who's the CTO at Walmart, and we had some of that as well. But it's actually really incredible how many of the heroes that we had on the show, or people that we just found really, really compelling, actually were just so down to earth. They were so down to earth, so interesting and easy to talk to, and just Matt, I think, represented that to me more than anyone. Like he is such an incredible guy. I was really blown away by him. This
continuing arc of 2019, realizing we're bigger than a podcast. Actually, it was another podcast that we had created in 2019 that I think bridged us into the transformation of Future Commerce as a business and as a media organization. We partnered in 2019 with Shopify to create a new series, a mini series under the Future Commerce Network of media. And that series was called Step by Step. And this is a clip from season 1 of Step by Step, which premiered in December of 2019. Welcome to Step by Step, a 5-part series from Future Commerce. In this series, we walk you through everything that you need to know to launch and grow a successful retail business. In Step by Step Season 1, we're talking about funding. You got to get paid, son. Couple things there. One, there's some audio processing that makes me sound like I have a lisp. Number 2, I'll be honest. This is part of the education of Philip and Brian. Is we were creating the content that we needed because we didn't understand private equity and venture capital.
It's true.
How many out there are sitting around lacking that information? How can we bring that to them with the tools that we had? That's why we created Step by Step.
And it's been just educational from there on out. Like all the different series we've had, we're on season 5. Season 6 is coming. We're about to launch season 5 in like a week, right?
Yeah, and we're in the midst of creating season 6. It's a thing that just has taken hold, and it's our most popular content by far.
Yes, absolutely. As a whole, like it's had a huge impact. And oh man, that first season though, I actually still look back at that as one of my favorites. And being able to bring Forerunner and we had Michelle from Lively on. And it was such a good series. Okay, victory lap over.
No, but it's good. And then the other side of that is in that same month, we sat down with Audrey McLaughlin to talk about like what's the antithesis of that? How do you build a business and not give up any equity? Let's listen to this clip from episode number 138 with Audrey McLaughlin.
While I was watching these young women that work for me and are building this company with me and seeing how they really fundamentally think different than the generations before them. And it was so inspiring and so interesting. And I just ultimately really, really wanted to be able to launch a brand that speaks to what's going on today and speaks to the customer that we would want to speak to. And so that all came together in the form of a brand we launched this year called Grayson, which is named after my fearless little 4-year-old real life princess named Grayson.
I'm going to be honest that I feel like I pulled the wrong clip on this one. What I wanted her to have said was talking about the 100 Club. It's this term she has for retaining 100% ownership of your business. But she's a serial entrepreneur, multi-time founder, and brilliant speaker. And Audrey opened up our eyes to there's another way to build a business in the, and stay outside the hype factory that is direct to consumer and venture backed startups in the retail world.
Sustainably built businesses.
That's right.
It was incredible. That was, again, another eye opener for me, like how you could go about building a brand that, that actually wasn't just, it wasn't just there to be sold. It was actually something that she cared about and was passionate about and is passionate about and is going to continue to invest her life in. That's incredible.
And that brings us up to 2020. 2020 was a bit of a year for everybody. But if you look at, from a Future Commerce perspective, the things that we did in 2020, that was the year where I think the world really validated the things that we created, from our vision report and getting retail coverage of our 9x9 report. We put out 4 reports last year, 4 original reports. We put out, I believe, 48 essays last year alone. We launched 2 new newsletters last year, and we brought on a brand new podcast. Lee Green joined us. A little bit of a clip there from Stairway to CEO.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Stairway to CEO podcast, brought to you by Future Commerce. I'm your host, Lee Green, and it's my mission to bring you a real, honest...
That sound right there is how hundreds upon hundreds of people begin their Tuesdays, is by listening to a brand new show that is sitting down and talking about the life stories and the founding journeys of CEOs of direct-to-consumer and e-commerce brands. And that also represented just a widening of our voice and our influence and by bringing on other people to come present different perspectives into our world of content that we're building at Future Commerce. It's humbling.
It is humbling. And I think this past year, I think we've continued to evolve our voice. And it's funny, like going back and applying the lens of today to the lens of yesteryear through this episode and thinking about how we've evolved in our thinking and changed our, how we see the future of commerce. What's driving that in many ways. And I think the driver, and we've already said this many times, continues to be people, and it will continue to be people. And technology is changing how people do things, but it's filling the fundamental needs and use cases and things that people, they have already in their lives. It's just we haven't really uncovered them yet, and so. Yeah. We're still uncovering those things. There's going to be more to come. I'm so excited about where we're headed for the next 100 episodes, and really not just the next 100 episodes, but all the things that we're doing right now. The next 100 reports, the next 100 articles, the next 100, whatever it is.
Anxiety, Brian.
Whatever it is that we're doing, the next 100 of them. There's a lot more to come, a lot more to uncover and to think about and to muse on and to listen to. I'm excited about all of it. I'm excited about what I'm going to learn in this process.
If you had asked me in 2016 what Future Commerce was, I would have said a podcast. And if you ask me in 2021 what Future Commerce is, I would say we're a media business that covers retail, but we believe that we have the power with our voice, right? We have the power to exert influence on the way that commerce is done in the world. And commerce can change the world, but you know what? We can change commerce. And we're doing that in 15 different ways these days. What an amazing journey. What an amazing thing that has been built with tens of thousands of you out there listening and participating with us. We want you to become more of a community and give you an opportunity to lend your voice to us. Why don't you drop us a line at hello@futurecommerce.fm. Let us know what this podcast has meant to you. Thank you so much for sticking with us for 4.5 years and for 200 episodes. It's been a complete honor. And from Brian and I both, thank you so much for listening to Future Commerce. And cheers, buddy.
Cheers
to the next 200.
Raise your coffee cup.
raise a glass. Thank you so much for listening to Future Commerce, and we'll see you for episode 201.